The dust from the funeral flowers had barely settled when the phone calls began. 2 weeks after we laid Martha to rest, I found myself standing in our kitchen on a Thursday morning, watching steam rise from a mug I couldn't bring myself to drink from. It was that blue ceramic one with the chip on the handle, a Father's Day gift from my granddaughter Lily years ago. Now it felt foreign in my hands, like it belonged to someone else entirely. Everything felt foreign. The house, my reflection in the hallway mirror, even my own voice whenever I answered the increasingly persistent calls from my children. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dad, we need to talk about the house. James's voice carried that barely restrained impatience I'd known since he was a teenager asking for money. Only now, at 42, he wasn't asking, he was telling. I set the untouched mug down on the counter with a soft click. "Good morning to you too, James," I replied, keeping my tone even. "Don't start with me," he snapped. "Sarah and I have been talking. That place is way too big for you alone. The taxes, the upkeep, it's just not realistic. We've already found some interested buyers." "There is no mortgage," I stated flatly. "Martha and I had paid it off 8 years ago, though I'd never mentioned it to the kids. They assumed, and I let them." The line went silent. Then a short, dismissive laugh erupted. That same laugh James had inherited from me, though I had never wielded it like a weapon the way he did. "Dad, please," he continued. "Mom's pension barely covered her medications. We all know you're under financial strain now." I walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the garden Martha and I had tended for 30 years. The rosemary bushes needed trimming. The apple tree was heavy with fruit that would soon need harvesting. Every plant, every stone wall, had become a monument to everything I'd lost, and everything I refused to surrender. "You're worried about me, is that it?" I asked, knowing full well it wasn't. "I'm worried about what's practical," he replied, each word clipped and precise. "We could put the money from the sale to good use. Sarah's business needs capital, and with Lily's college tuition—" I stopped listening as he mentioned his wife's name. My mind was already constructing the scene. James at their dining table, laptop open, a spreadsheet with neat columns labeled "Dad's House Sale, Proceeds, Split." I knew the layout of his thinking. I had taught him numbers when he was 8, making him calculate change at the grocery store. Now he was calculating me. "James," I said, interrupting him, "you've been planning this for a while. That's called being responsible. We can't sit around waiting until something happens to you." I let that ugly, unvarnished sentiment hang in the air between us. Until something happens to you, the unspoken truth that my children were already dividing my life while I was still living it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "Thanks for your concern," I said, my voice as flat as the apple tree's shadow across the garden path. "I'll think about it." "But Dad—" I ended the call before he could sell me my own life in bullet points. The house felt quiet again. But the silence had changed shape. It was no longer the stillness of a home in mourning. It was the pause between one blow and the next. I poured the coffee down the drain. My hand smelled faintly of the rosemary Martha used to cut for Sunday roasts. She'd hand me sprigs like small trophies. "Fresh from the source," she'd say with a smile, even though we both knew I'd just been standing there watching her work. The phone rang again. Sarah this time. I considered ignoring it, but if grief teaches you anything, it's that avoidance doesn't stop what's coming. "Dad," she began, her voice pitched a little too high, the way she spoke when trying to make bad news sound like a gift. "James and I are on the same page. You both think I should sell the house," I finished for her. She hesitated. "It's for the best. You could move in with us. We've got that finished basement, a full bath, lots of light. James says we could add a kitchenette. You'd have your own entrance, your own space. It's perfect." Perfect. A word too big for 4 walls below ground. "And the money?" I asked.
"Well," she began carefully, "after we cover the contractor for the basement improvements, you could set some aside. Help with Lily's tuition. Maybe help James with his new business venture. It's all family, Dad. Win-win. Win-win. I could hear the echo of James's voice in hers, the rehearsed cadence of people who had already decided the ending before asking if I'd read the script. "Sarah," I said, "when was the last time you called me to talk about something other than money or the house?" "That's not fair," she protested. "I've been busy. Lily's in her senior year. Work's been—" "2 months," I said. "It's been 2 months since you called for anything else." Silence stretched between us, brittle and thin. "You've been sending Lily money every month?" she blurted finally, as if it were an accusation. "Yes," I said. $500 for the past 2 years. Another pause. "She doesn't need to know that," Sarah said stiffly. "Of course she didn't. Because if Lily knew, she might question the story she'd been told about her grandfather, the fragile old man who couldn't manage his affairs, the one who needed decisions made for him." "I need to go," I said, and hung up before the conversation could turn uglier than it already had. For a long time, I just stood in the hallway. The late morning light slanted through the front windows, catching dust motes dancing above the console table. Martha's reading glasses were still there, folded neatly on top of a paperback she'd never finish. I reached out, then stopped. Touching them felt like a step I wasn't ready to take. Instead, my feet carried me to our basement, a place Martha had insisted on finishing properly years ago. "Every house needs a secret heart," she'd said. The room smelled of lemon oil and the faint trace of her perfume, something floral and subtle that clung to the curtains. Her desk was exactly as she'd left it, pen resting diagonally across a yellow legal pad, the corner of an envelope peeking from under a stack of papers. I sat in her chair. The leather was worn smooth where her elbows had rested. For the first time in 2 weeks, my shoulders eased. There was a filing cabinet against the wall, one Martha had insisted we bolt to the floor during the renovation. "For stability," she'd said with a wink that had confused me at the time. I opened the bottom drawer. Inside were the usual layers of life: old tax returns, appliance manuals, greeting cards saved from birthdays long past. But as I shifted these papers, my fingers found the edge of something cold and metallic. A safe. Small, discreet, and embedded in the cabinet itself, with a digital keypad I'd never seen before. My heart quickened. Martha had secrets. This was one I hadn't known about until now. My fingers hovered over the keypad. What would she have used? Our anniversary? Too obvious. Lily's birthday? Perhaps. I tried a few combinations with no success. Then, on a hunch, I entered the date we paid off the mortgage, the day Martha had danced around the kitchen with the letter from the bank, singing, "Free at last, free at last." The safe clicked open. Inside was a pale blue folder, heavier than it looked. The paper inside shifted with a faint whisper. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I set it on the desk and rested my palm on the cover. A yellow sticky note was attached to the front, with Martha's handwriting in tidy block letters. "If you're reading this, you need to know what's inside." I sat there as the late afternoon light warmed the side of my face, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt something other than loss. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was direction. The blue folder sat like an unopened letter from the past. Outside, a breeze moved through the apple tree, scattering patterns of light and shadow across the desk. The air carried the scent of rosemary from the garden, pressing against memories I wasn't ready to name. When I finally opened the folder, the first thing I saw was a sheaf of financial statements. Bank accounts I didn't recognize. Not our joint accounts we'd had for decades, but individual ones, all in Martha's name. One was from a small credit union in another county, another from an online bank I'd never heard her mention. Each had modest sums, $12,400 here, $18,250 there. Not fortunes, but enough to make me wonder why they'd been kept separate. Under the statements were property documents. My breath caught when I saw the first, a deed for a cabin in the Smoky Mountains, purchased 12 years ago. The owner's name, Martha Elizabeth Ryan. No mention of me. I flipped to the next page. A letter from a property management firm in Gatlinburg, dated last spring, confirming the cabin's current value and offering to manage a rental contract. Martha had declined, in a handwritten note at the bottom, "Not yet. Keep private." Private? The word sat like a stone in my stomach. There were more documents. Life insurance policies I'd never signed, all naming beneficiaries. I expected James and Sarah, but one caught my eye. A newer policy, much smaller, with only one beneficiary, Lily. No mention of her parents. I leaned back in Martha's chair. The lemon-scented polish seemed stronger now, mixing with the metallic taste that had risen in my mouth. Martha had always been meticulous, deliberate. If she'd kept this from me, it wasn't oversight. It was intent. I picked up a smaller envelope tucked into the back of the folder. Inside was a letter dated 3 years ago, written in Martha's looping cursive. "Richard, if you found this, I'm gone. And if I'm right, the calls have already started. They will circle you, not because they need you, but because they want what you've built. I've watched it for years. Small comments, questions about money, the way they count what isn't theirs yet. You've always given them the benefit of the doubt. I stopped doing that long ago. The house is yours. It stays yours. I paid it off so you'd never have to answer to them about it. But I also knew they'd try to make you believe you couldn't manage alone. That's why there's a second plan. The cabin in Tennessee is for you, but not on paper. You'll find instructions in the back. Follow them if you need to disappear for a while. Sometimes the only way to win is not to play their game." Martha's voice was in my head as I read. Calm, even, not angry, but certain. I turned to the back pocket of the folder. There was a typed page with contacts for the Gatlinburg property management firm, a local caretaker named Eleanor, and a key taped to the paper. Next to the key was a note in Martha's hand. "Trust Eleanor. She owes me her life. Long story." I let the paper fall onto the desk. My pulse was steady, but my mind was racing. For the rest of the afternoon, I moved through the house like a man walking in 2 timelines at once. Every object I passed, the framed photo of James at his high school graduation, Sarah's ceramic vase from college, Lily's crayon drawing of the garden, now felt like evidence in a case I hadn't known I was building. In the kitchen, I found myself staring at the spice rack Martha had arranged by height, not alphabet. She'd always said it looked better that way, but now I wondered how many small, deliberate choices she'd made that I'd never questioned. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the sink, watching the late afternoon light turn the garden gold. I remembered the last conversation Martha and I had about the kids before she got sick. "They love you," I'd said, irritated that she'd been distant with James during his last visit. "They love the version of me that helps them, the version that says yes." I'd dismissed it at the time as one of her darker moods. Now it played back like a warning I had ignored. That evening, James called again. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Dad, just think about what I said. We can make this easy for you. Don't make it harder than it needs to be." Easy for him, maybe. Sarah texted an hour later. "We'll come by Saturday to talk. Bringing Lily. It'll be good for everyone." The phrasing wasn't lost on me. Bringing Lily. Like I was the guest, not the host. I put the phone face down and went back to the basement. The folder was still on the desk. I opened it again, this time studying the insurance policy naming Lily. The date was from last year, well after Martha's diagnosis.
She'd made a choice, one that specifically bypassed her own children. As night settled over the house, I turned on the lamp in the basement. The warm light caught on the edge of a photograph, tucked in the back of the folder. It was of Martha and Lily in the garden, both wearing straw hats, their hands dirty from planting herbs. Martha's arm was around Lily, her smile wide and genuine. On the back, Martha had written, "Teach her how to keep what matters." I sat with that photograph for a long time, listening to the ticking of the olive clock on the wall, the one Martha insisted we keep, even when it ran slow. I thought about calling Lily, telling her everything, but Martha's note said, "If you need to disappear," not "if you need to explain." This wasn't the time to show my hand. Not yet. Near midnight, I locked the basement door for the first time in years. The blue folder went into the safe, which I reset with a new code, the date Martha and I had first met. The key to the cabin went into my wallet behind a photo I kept of us on our 30th anniversary. I stood there for a moment in the dimness, hand resting on the filing cabinet, listening to the quiet house. Somewhere in the darkness, I could almost hear Martha's voice. "You don't have to fight the way they expect." The next morning, I woke before dawn. I made coffee, drank it this time, and sat at the kitchen table with a pad of paper. I wrote 2 columns, what they know and what they don't. The first list was short. The second was longer than I expected. When the sun finally broke over the garden, I looked at the apple tree and thought about Tennessee, about Eleanor, whoever she was, about disappearing, not out of fear, but on my terms. For the first time since Martha's funeral, I felt something sharp under the grief. Not anger exactly, but resolve. They thought I was an old man standing on the edge of a cliff waiting to be pushed. They had no idea I'd already built a bridge. Saturday came with a pale winter sun, thin and reluctant. I'd been up since 6, walking the garden paths in my coat, feeling the crunch of frost underfoot. By 8, I'd pruned the rosemary, swept the stone steps, and put the kettle on. It wasn't about tidying for them, it was about reclaiming my rhythm before they arrived. At 9:17, the sound of tires on gravel reached me from the driveway. I watched from the kitchen window as James's black SUV eased in, the paint so polished it caught the morning light. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, phone already in hand. Lily was in the back, forehead pressed against the window. I opened the door before they could knock. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice even. Lily smiled and ran up the steps first. "Hi, Grandpa." She wrapped her arms around my waist, her hair smelling faintly of the strawberry shampoo Martha used to buy for her. "Hey, kiddo," I said, holding her a moment longer than necessary. "Come on in, it's warmer inside." James and Sarah followed, bringing with them the scent of expensive perfume and cold air. James didn't take off his sunglasses until we were in the kitchen. "You've been busy," he said, glancing around. "Place looks neat." I poured tea into the heavy mugs Martha liked to use for guests. I had time. Sarah's eyes swept over the counters, the cabinets, the framed photo of Martha and me on our 30th anniversary. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We thought it'd be good to see you, Dad, and talk." I gestured toward the table. "Talk then." They sat across from me, side by side like a united front. Lily wandered off to the living room, flipping through a stack of books on the coffee table. I could hear the faint sound of pages turning. James cleared his throat. "Look, Dad, we don't want to drag this out. We found a buyer. Solid offer. More than the place is worth, honestly. It's a chance for you to downsize and not worry about taxes or maintenance." I stirred my tea slowly, letting the spoon ring against the ceramic. "I told you there's no mortgage. Taxes are manageable." "That's not the point," Sarah said, leaning forward. "It's about practicality. You don't need all this space. You're alone here. I looked from one to the other. Practicality for me or you? James's jaw tightened. You think we're doing this for ourselves? I think you should answer the question. Silence stretched, broken only by the sound of Lily laughing at something in her book. In moments like this, Martha's voice came back to me. You don't have to fight the way they expect. So I didn't argue. I let the silence do the work. People tend to fill it, and James was no exception. It's just, we have plans. The offer would let you move somewhere comfortable, maybe near us, and it would free up. He stopped himself, but I knew where he'd been headed. Free up the capital. Sarah picked up his thread. We could help with finding a condo, something manageable, close to Lily. I took a slow sip of tea. What if I'm comfortable here? That's not sustainable, James said, sharper now. I set my cup down, letting the sound land like a gavel. Do you remember the summer you were 12, James? The roof leaked over the east bedroom. I spent 2 weeks fixing it. You and I went up there together. You learned how to lay shingles. James frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Everything, I said. Because this house isn't just space. It's work. Work I'm still capable of doing. Sarah rolled her eyes slightly. Dad, you're almost 70. You shouldn't have to.
And yet, I said, I can. I didn't tell them about the folder in the safe, about Tennessee, about Martha's letter. That was for later. Lily wandered back in, holding a drawing she'd made with colored pencils. I drew your garden, she said, handing it to me. I studied it, bright green rosemary bushes, a yellow apple tree, and a small gray house in the corner, Martha's basement office. Lily had even drawn the curtains. It's perfect, I said, smiling. You remember the color of Grandma's curtains? Lily grinned. Of course, Grandma told me to always draw what's true. James shifted in his chair. Why don't you go play in the den, Lil? She skipped off. When she was gone, I leaned back. Here's the thing. Martha wanted me here, in this house. She made sure I could stay. Paid it off years ago. Sarah blinked. Paid it off? I nodded. 8 years ago. Quietly, because she didn't want to be sounded about it. James's mouth pressed into a thin line. Why didn't you say that before? Didn't think I needed to, I said. It was a small drop of truth, just enough to shift the ground under them without revealing how deep the foundation went. They stayed another half hour, trying to steer the conversation back to logistics, but I let their words drift past me. I asked about Lily's school, about Sarah's new job, and James's latest business venture. Every answer was shorter than the last. When they finally stood to leave, James said, Just think about it, Dad. The buyer won't wait forever. I'll think, I said, walking them to the door. Lily hugged me again. Bye, Grandpa. I'll come back soon. Anytime, kiddo, I said, and I meant it. After the SUV rolled away, I stood in the doorway, feeling the cold air on my face. Inside, the house was silent again, but it didn't feel empty. In the basement, I reopened the safe and looked at the photograph of Martha and Lily. Teach her how to keep what matters. I realized then that the real battle wasn't about the house at all. It was about teaching the next generation not to let go of what's worth holding on. And the first lesson would be subtle, the kind of move they wouldn't see until it was too late. I picked up the phone and dialed the Tennessee number Martha had left me. When the line clicked, a woman's voice answered. Eleanor speaking. Eleanor, I said, my voice steady. Martha Ryan was my wife. She told me to call you when the time came. There was a pause. Then a warm, accented voice. Then, Mr. Ryan, I think we should meet. And soon. I hung up, the echo of her voice still in my ear. For the first time in weeks, I felt the ground shift, not under me, but for them. They thought they were setting the terms, but the board had just been reset. Eleanor's voice lingered long after we hung up, like the warmth that remains in a room after someone kind has just left it. I stood at the kitchen window, the phone face down on the sill, and watched the rosemary shiver in a breeze I couldn't feel.
The garden had become my metronome. Rosemary to the left, apple tree to the right. The flagstones in between like a score I knew by heart. There's a steadiness to things that grow quietly. You can borrow it if you pay attention. I made a list on the yellow legal pad that still smelled faintly of Martha's hand cream. 3 columns this time instead of 2. What they know, what they don't, what I want them to think. The third column mattered most. Revenge is not an explosion. It's a thermostat. You bring the temperature where you need it, and you let everyone else mistake comfort for control. My first call after Eleanor was not to James or Sarah. It was to a number I hadn't dialed in more than a decade. Michael Donovan, Estates and Trusts. He'd handled a skirmish years back when Martha's aunt died, and a cousin appeared with opinions. Michael had a manner I trusted. Unfussy, precise, allergic to drama. "Richard," he said when his assistant passed me through, "I'm sorry about Martha. Come in this afternoon, bring whatever she left you to bring." I could hear the soft click of him opening his calendar. The sound made me feel steadier than coffee. I gathered the blue folder into a messenger bag, documents nested in documents like rings inside a tree, and locked the basement door. For the first time since the funeral, I put on a proper suit. Grief makes sweatpants feel like armor, but armor has its time and place. Today, I wanted to look like a man who still signs his name with a straight line. Michael's office sat in a brick building that used to be a bank.
You could tell from the vault door they'd left his decor in the lobby, a reminder that, once upon a time, people put value behind steel and not in a cloud. His receptionist had kind eyes that didn't ask for anything. She offered water. I said yes out of respect for the ritual. When Michael stepped out, he wore the same gray suit I remembered, the one that looked permanent on him, like an assumption no one had challenged. He didn't hug me. I was grateful. We sat at a conference table, the color of old tobacco. I placed the folder between us and flipped it open to the page I wanted him to see first. The deed to the house recorded 8 years ago, my name alone on it. "Martha insisted," I said, and felt my throat tighten. He nodded, businesslike, and set his reading glasses lower on his nose. "Well," he said softly, scanning quickly but thoroughly, "she did this right." He tapped the margin with a pen. "Quitclaim deed to your sole ownership, recorded, notarized, no encumbrances, no lien holders. If anyone's promising anyone a sale without your signature, they're selling air." He kept going. "We'll revisit the trust we set up when James was still in college. You remember," he said without looking up. "We amended the trust 3 years back. I did, vaguely. Why on the porch, Martha insisting we do one more pass of the paperwork while the light was nice. She removed the children as presumptive remainder beneficiaries to the real property in favor of a specific bequest to you. They inherit from your estate if and only if you say so. The only non-probate transfer she left outside your discretion is a small life insurance policy set for Lily." He glanced up then, reading my face. That one was important to her. "I know," I said. It hurt less than I expected to say it aloud. He held up a hand, the way he does when he's about to ask a question that matters. "Has either child attempted to act on your behalf, represent themselves as having authority?" He didn't have to explain what he meant. Power of attorney games, signatures that smelled like entitlement. "James found a buyer," I said. "Came to my door with a letter of intent." I kept my voice dry as a letter. Michael's mouth made a shape that wasn't a smile. "Good. Then let me be clear on 2 pieces of law." He ticked them off like a man laying cards on felt. 1, without a valid agency document, current, signed, specific, no one can bind you to anything. 2, even if you had executed such an agency, you can revoke it unilaterally at any time, and any third party who proceeds after notice does so at their peril. He slid a paper across the table. "This is a template letter. We'll put names to it, realtor, buyer, agent, anyone who sent you a document. Cease from representing you, future communications in writing only." I read it quickly, catching more tone than content. I liked the tone. It was not angry, it was final. "And this," he said, placing a second document behind the first, "is a notice of non-representation. It says plainly, you have not authorized any person to act on your behalf in the sale of your real property, and any claim to the contrary is fraudulent.
I'll file copies with the county recorder and send them certified mail so nobody can pretend they missed it." "I appreciate it," I said. The room felt a half-degree cooler, which meant my temperature was settling where I wanted it. He closed the deed and re-entered the folder with a small, unconscious gesture I recognized from the last time we were in a room like this. "Now," he said, "what else is in there?" "Tennessee," I said. He lifted a brow. Not mockery, not surprise, more like the interest of a chess player when a pawn becomes a queen. I turned to the Gatlinburg letter, the caretaker's name, and the key taped to the inside of the back pocket. I gave him the summary first: cabin in the Smokies, title in Martha's name, and instructions to trust Eleanor. Then the specifics: a typed sheet with Tennessee contacts, and in Martha's handwriting, 3 short notes that made a shape. "Keep private, use only if necessary, your life is not a negotiation." Michael leaned forward. "Your wife was a very smart woman," he said, and I nodded because truth doesn't require flourish. "We'll contact the Gatlinburg firm on your behalf, establish your standing as surviving spouse, confirm title, and, if necessary, effect transfer." He paused, weighing words. "Do you want this property to remain discreet?" "Yes," I said, quicker than I'd meant to. "For now."
"Then we set up a holding structure," he said, warming to the work. "Tennessee Council will advise in the right vehicle there. On your side, we can create a revocable trust with a name that doesn't ring bells, something boring. Title the cabin to it once Gatlinburg clears it, and keep correspondence through my office, the mailing address we control. You want distance? We can create distance." I liked the way he said, "we." Some words are ropes thrown across water. He made more notes. 2 other items. He held a finger up for each. First, credit freezes for you at all bureaus, lifted only by you, not because I think your children would misuse your information, he added, and we both let the lie pass politely between us, but because weird things happen when word gets around that property is in motion. Second, we take a look at any accounts in Martha's name you are unaware of. If she intended you to have them, and based on what you've shown me she did, then we move cleanly. Otherwise, we leave them where she left them, by her design, and do not volunteer information no one is entitled to." "Quietly," I said. "Quietly," he echoed. When we finished signing the letters, his assistant came in with envelopes already addressed, the barcode stickers for certified mail peeking out. Watching those white rectangles slide across the table felt better than any speech I could have made to my son. The world loves paper. Paper loves procedure. When you can't make people decent, you can make them careful. Back at home, I put the carbon copies in a different hiding place. Not Martha's safe, but a fireproof box in my own closet. The distinction mattered. Her folder was how we got here. My box was what we did with it. The afternoon brought a voicemail from James. "Dad, call me back. Don't do anything rash. We're trying to make this easy." The word easy again, as if comfort were something that could be used as a leash. I let it sit unanswered. A text from Sarah followed an hour later. "Dinner Tuesday? We can bring takeout. You like that chicken from Morrison's?" I typed, "Sounds good," and didn't send it. Then I typed it again and did. You don't win by being predictable. You win by controlling the clock. I drove to the post office before closing and rented a P.O. box. The woman behind the counter had the patience of someone who has watched thousands of people fumble with forms without learning a single thing. "Smallest size?" she asked. "Medium," I said, "and an extra key." There's preparation that looks like paranoia, and preparation that looks like a plan. The P.O. box key sat warm in my pocket as I walked out. A small click that translated in my head as options. On the way home, I stopped by the cemetery. I hadn't been back since we put Martha in the ground. It hadn't felt like a place I could get anything done, but there are conversations you cannot have anywhere else. I parked under the gnarled maple and carried nothing with me. Her name on the stone still surprised me, in the way a mirror does in bad lighting. I stood there, in my good suit, and said nothing for a long time, letting the wind move in the field of flags beside the veterans section. When I did speak, it wasn't eloquent. They think I'm soft. They think grief makes me malleable. The air didn't answer,
but the ground felt steady, and that was enough. You did most of the hard part, I added softer. Now I'll do the rest. On Monday morning, the certified mail receipts started hitting my tracking app one by one. Broker, buyer's agent, county recorder, a domino line of green check marks that had nothing poetic about them and still felt like poetry. 2 hours later, a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Mr. Ryan, this is Greg from Cornerstone Realty. There seems to be some confusion. Your son indicated... I stopped the playback. He'd already said the only part that mattered. I returned the call after lunch and put him on speaker, setting my phone on the counter where I could see the little red dot recording the conversation, because, one day, you always wish you had. Mr. Whitfield, there is no confusion. I own my home. Any further contact about listing or sale must be in writing to my attorney. You have his address. Do not come to my door again. Do not speak with my children about my property. He tried to sound conciliatory, but words put into service of presumption can't hide their true nature. Of course, we only want what's best for your client, I said. Good day. I sent the audio file to Michael's office with the subject line so dull it might as well have been a traffic report. He wrote back 12 minutes later. Perfect. Logged. It's a strange relief to have your life translated into administrative verbs. Eleanor and I spoke that afternoon. Her English had a music I liked, and when she laughed, her voice did a small skip on the second syllable. Your Martha, she saved me once. I didn't ask how yet. The people who deserve your trust will tell you when the timing is right. The cabin is ready, she added, and I pictured wooden walls and green shutters, even though I had not yet seen them. You come, I place fresh towels, apples in a bowl. You will sleep. Sleep felt like a luxury I had been stealing in small coins. Soon, I said. I need a week. I will wait, she said. Tennessee waits well. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and bought a ticket to Knoxville with a connection through Charlotte. One way, fully refundable. Purchased with a card Martha had labeled in our budget as adventure money. I used the P.O. box for billing and printed nothing. I took the extra step of turning off my phone's location sharing because the last time I set up my grandson's game console, it surprised me how much these devices like to tell on us. I wasn't hiding. I was simply refusing to be found by people who hadn't asked permission to look. I walked the house that evening with a notebook, not to inventory things, but to listen. Objects talk to you if you let them. The framed photo of James at 12 in his baseball uniform speaks to the talent we celebrated before achievements became investments. Sarah's college ceramics speak to creativity, yes, and also to the way she loved praise more than the clay. Lily's crayon garden speaks to a part of the future I'm willing to invest in. I put sticky notes on boxes in the hall closet, not because I planned to ship them yet, but because it calmed a part of me to see instructions I'd given myself. Mark, not fragile for James, careful to Sarah, later for Lily. Tuesday morning, the doorbell rang at 9:03. Through the peephole, the realtor again. A second man beside him, older with the look of a person who'd rather be anywhere else. I opened the door only as wide as the chain allowed. Certified letters, I said, mean we don't need to do this dance. The older man raised his hands. I'm your son's attorney, he said, and my lip curled involuntarily. He asked me to check on you. Check, I said. From there. I didn't break the chain. You received my counsel's notice yesterday. The realtor spoke then, attempting to be genial. We thought perhaps you hadn't seen. I see fine, I said. When you are 69 and still competent, there is a particular satisfaction in saying that without heat. You may leave a card. They did, and I let the cards sit on the console table like two moths, harmless unless you forget they eat through fabric when you don't watch them. At noon, James called. I answered this time. It felt like a day for letting things reveal themselves. Dad, what are you doing? No hello. Greg says you threatened legal action. I promised it, I said. Different verb. You're being ridiculous, he snapped. This buyer is real. This is a good number. We're trying to... Who is we? I asked quietly. He inhaled sharply. Sarah and I.
our families, you know what I mean. I do, I said, and that's the problem. There was a silence that told me he was calculating the cost of his next sentence. If you insist on making this difficult, he said finally, we'll have to look at other options. Conservatorships are a thing for a reason. The word slid into the line like a piece of glass in soup. I didn't let it cut me. That is a serious claim, I said, still even. Are you accusing me of incapacity? He's saying, he said, softer now, that we can't sit around and wait for you to start making mistakes. I just made one. I picked up this call, but I am not interested in being clever so much as being clear. Any further threats will be forwarded to my attorney. We will meet on Thursday at my house at 2 o'clock. Bring your counsel. I'll have mine. We will talk like adults or not at all. He sputtered, then said yes, because bullies do prefer a schedule if it offers them a chance to wear ties. When I hung up, I walked to the basement and opened the safe where I had placed the blue folder.
I took out the small envelope I hadn't touched yet. On the front, Martha had written, Independence. Inside was a bank card and a typed slip with a pin, a note in her hand underneath. You hate allowances. Consider this a dare rather than a gift. Use it to build a life, not to buy time. The audacity of her faith made my eyes ache. I set the card on the desk where the light could catch it and remind me I had a spine. That evening, I changed the deadbolt on the front door, not because I was afraid, but because I liked the feeling of a key in a lock that answers to me. I oiled the hinges, tightened the screws in the banister on the back staircase, and replaced the batteries in the smoke detectors. Work that seems small, until one night it isn't. When the house sighed into the quiet that follows honest labor, I poured a finger of the scotch I had been saving for a celebration I hadn't defined yet, and sat at the kitchen table with nothing in front of me. The absence of paper felt like a decision. Sleep came clean for the first time in weeks. I woke just before 6 to a text from a Tennessee number. Mr. Ryan, we have prepared documents to establish you as the sole heir of the property. Please confirm when you are ready to receive the courier. Signed with a name I didn't recognize from the letterhead. Paper, moving through the world on my behalf while I slept. There are worse lullabies. I took a walk around the block. No coat, just breathing like mist. An older neighbor, Joyce, waved from her porch and asked after me in a way that did not require an answer. When I reached my front steps again, a small cardboard package sat against the door. No return address, just my name and James's quick, impatient handwriting. Inside, a glossy brochure from a retirement community. Smiling, gray-haired people near a pool, a list of amenities and bullet points. Granite counters, a yoga studio, a shuttle to the mall, a note on top. Thought you'd like to look. Love, Jay. I smiled in a way that did not show teeth, and set the brochure under the scotch bottle to level a wobble. Useful, after all. You're tired, I said, nodding. I understand. Being told no is exhausting when you've rehearsed yes. We let the quiet sit at the table for a minute, then I pushed a sheet of paper across to them. It was not what they expected, a simple list written in my neat block letters. Here is what I am doing, on my timeline. It had 3 items. I am not selling my home. If I choose to relocate at any point, I will tell you after the decision is made. I will continue to support Lily directly, at my discretion. Any attempt to mediate that support through intermediaries ends all support. Sarah's eyes glistened. It surprised me, it shouldn't have, that behind the calculation, there was still a person who could be reached by consequence. Dad, she whispered. I am not the enemy, I said, and felt the truth of it to my feet. But I am not a resource to be managed. Michael collected his pad. Jeff murmured something circumspect about time to digest. James stood without looking at me and moved toward the door like the house offended him. Sarah lingered. At the threshold, she turned back. Do you have to be so cold? I don't, I said. I choose to be clear. They were gone 3 minutes when my phone buzzed. A Tennessee number. I stepped into the living room and closed the door behind me before I answered. Mr. Ryan, the voice said. Friendly. Precise. We have couriered documents to your postbox. They include confirmation of your status and a temporary letter of authorization for the caretaker to act on your instruction. He paused, then added, We also included information your wife asked us to give you only when you were ready. She was very careful. Thank you, I said. My voice sounded like a man who knew what he would do next. It felt strange and good in my mouth. When I hung up, I stood there with my hand on the back of Martha's favorite chair. My thumb rubbed the place where the fabric had worn smooth from years of her leaning in. Paper could not bring her back. Paper could not teach my children what she had tried to teach them before they decided that wanting was the same as deserving. But paper, when thick enough and stamped by the right offices, could hold a boundary, while the rest of me did the quieter work of living. On my way to the P.O. box, I passed the retirement community from the brochure. The sign out front promised maintenance-free living. I laughed, the sound surprising me. There is no such thing as maintenance-free anything. Either you do the work yourself or someone does it to you. I prefer the kind of work that leaves calluses on my palms and my name on the deed. The post office smelled like cut paper and patience. My key turned smoothly. Inside my box, a yellow slip waited. Clerk for package. The woman with the kind eyes handed me a flat envelope heavy enough to change a day. Back in my truck, I slid it open with my thumbnail. Stamps from Gatlinburg winked up at me. I lifted the first document. Confirmation in black ink that a small cabin with wooden walls and green shutters across the mountains was, in the eyes of 2 states, mine to decide upon. Underneath, the letter for Eleanor, her name in print, crisp as certainty. And at the bottom, a note in Martha's hand, a copy of a copy, still sure despite the generations of paper between us. If you're holding this, you are not lost. You are choosing. I put the envelope on the passenger seat where she used to ride and drove home slower than usual, as if speed might shake something loose I wanted to keep. In the driveway, I killed the engine and sat a moment. The house looked back at me. Old, honest, a place that asked for work and paid in dignity. I thought about Tennessee, apples in a bowl, a porch where the wind carried the forest. I thought about Lily's drawing and James's jaw and Sarah's eyes. Then, because a plan is only as good as the step you take next, I picked up my phone and opened a new message to Eleanor. Arriving soon. Please prepare the cabin as you would prepare for Martha. I hit send. A second later, as you wish, Mr. Ryan. I will set out fresh towels and cut apples. We will wait for you. I carried the Gatlinburg envelope inside and set it next to the blue folder on the desk. The two together made a shape I recognized, past and future stacked neatly, present in between. I rested my hand on both and let the house be quiet around me. It was the kind of quiet that isn't empty. It was the kind that waits for the next act. The Gatlinburg envelope stayed on Martha's desk overnight like a quiet lighthouse. Paper is a kind of light. I didn't open it again before bed. I didn't need to. Knowing it existed changed the way the house sounded when I moved through it. Floorboards that had creaked like complaints now felt like conversations. The furnace kicking on didn't feel like age. It felt like loyalty. A strange thing happens when you stop waiting to be told who you are. The objects that have always been with you finally answer back. Morning brought a sky the color of dishwater and the kind of cold that makes coffee taste like a decision. I drank mine standing at the sink. The rosemary was still trimmed the way I'd left it. The apple tree looked somehow less like an accusation and more like a task. Martha used to say, "A life is built from the tasks you stop resenting." I rinsed the mug, set it upside down on the drying rack, and took a legal pad to the kitchen table. This time the columns were labeled more plainly. What goes, what stays, what travels. What goes ended up looking like a family portrait drawn by a court reporter. Shoes from a decade when James thought Italian leather could do what consistency couldn't. The butcher block knife set Sarah borrowed for a Thanksgiving that kept expanding to include everyone except the people who cooked. Boxes of trophies, ribbons, plaques.
The small currencies of childhood we hang on to because the adult currencies turned out to be less certain than advertised. What stayed was blessedly short. The table where the kids' heights were ticked into the wood. The books with Marta's marginalia like small trails through a forest. The piano she never learned to play but loved to polish. What travels was the least complicated list I'd made since all this began. The Gatlinburg envelope, one suitcase, passport, her photograph from the beach the year we let ourselves be young for more than a weekend. I called the moving company at 9:02 because 9 felt like starting a fight, and 9:30 felt like letting something start me. A man named Rodriguez answered. His voice had the patient sturdiness of someone who had lifted other people's lives into trucks for a living and still believed in returning phone calls. We spoke in specifics. 2 deliveries, 2 addresses, 1 truck, 1 morning. He asked if this was an estate clearance. I told him honestly that it was a correction. He laughed once, softly, as if to say he understood more than I'd said. "You want them to sign?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "And you'll tell them the sender is Richard Ryan." "Anything else?" "Don't be late," I said. "Let the timing do some of the talking." He gave me a window between 7 and 9. I said 7, as if the minute could obey me. The rest of the day I spent touching what would go and what would stay. Boxes have a smell when they leave the garage, dust and ambition. I pulled the ones with the right sizes and shapes and started in the bedrooms that hadn't been their bedrooms in 20 years, and still managed to insist on being called that. James's room first. The posters were gone, but the wall where his bed had been still had faint squares of paint that aged differently where sunlight couldn't reach. I packed his high school yearbooks, the stack of baseball cards he swore would pay for college, the pale blue tie I bought him when he decided to be a man in a suit because being a man in a mirror wasn't enough some days. I read the letter I wrote him on his 18th birthday, the one where I told him courage was mostly showing up when the story wasn't about you. I read it, folded it, and put it on top of his trophies. I didn't add a note. The letter would do its work. Sarah's room made a different kind of sound when I opened the closet, something like glass that has remembered being sand. Scarves carefully tied around hangers, a shoebox labeled clay that held more newspaper than art. The piano books from the 6 months she begged to learn and then remembered it's not praise that teaches your fingers to keep going when they don't want to. I wrapped the books in brown paper with the kind of attention you give to a story you're done trying to fix. I put her 7th grade essay, the one where she wrote about wanting to be the person who brings things to the table, on top of the piano books and closed the lid of the box gently. She hadn't meant money when she wrote that. That's the thing about time. It rewrites us if we don't pay attention. In the hallway closet, I found the box with Lily's Christmas ornaments, the glitter-crusted cardboard stars she insisted we keep, even when glitter found its way into everything, even the butter dish. Those didn't go into any shipment. Those went on the what travels list, because there are some things you don't surrender to a lesson. The house changed as the boxes filled. Not empty or clearer, exactly. There is a mercy in choosing what is yours to carry and what is your job to set down. At noon, I drove to the hardware store for packing tape, Sharpies, and the particular screws that fit the back plate of the latch on the side door. On my way out, an end cap display of inexpensive safes caught my eye. Little black boxes with codes on their faces, the kind of thing that promises more than it can deliver and still proves useful in a pinch. I bought one, not for jewelry or cash, but for copies. People think originals are what matter, but a well-placed copy can save you when the original is in the wrong hands. Back home, I labeled each box like a promise that required no witness. James Personal, return. Sarah Piano Books, return. James Trophies, return. Sarah Clay Box, return. The word return calmed me. When someone decides you are a resource, sometimes the most effective response is to give them back what they left behind. You can keep your mouth closed and still make your point if your handwriting is neat enough. At 3, I called Michael's office and told his assistant about the moving truck in the morning. It felt right to let someone on my side know where the furniture would be tomorrow. It's a particular kind of loneliness, going to war against people whose Christmas photos still sit on your mantle. Paperwork is not company, but it is companionship of a kind.
Before we hung up, I asked for one more letter, a simple memo addressed "To whom it may concern," stating that my house was unlisted, not for sale, not subject to any pending transaction. A sentence that would sound boring until someone needed to be bored into leaving me alone. By late afternoon, the winter light had that nickel tone it gets when the day wants to be done before you do. I ran a soft cloth over the table where Martha and I had moved our lives through numbers every December. Tithes, taxes, the small categories we pretended to hate and secretly loved because they proved to us we were still steering something. I set the Gatlinburg envelope on the table, opened it, and took out the letter for Eleanor, the one with her name crisp and certain, and placed it into the new safe. Then I made 3 copies of the certificate confirming my status in Tennessee and put them in 3 different places: the safe, the fireproof box in my closet, and a manila envelope in the trunk of the car under the spare tire. My father taught me that if you have to hide something, hide it where people are already tired. No one wants to lift a spare tire. At dinner, I boiled pasta and oversalted it. Martha used to say that grief makes you forget the math of the kitchen. I ate it anyway, standing at the counter, reading the text from Sarah that said, "Tuesday still stands, we can bring chicken." And I replied, yes. I included a smile I didn't feel because sometimes you let the other side think they're playing a part in your plan. It makes everyone more polite until it's time not to be. I slept in Martha's chair in the living room, the one that creaks like something you're not supposed to sit on. Her smell was nearly gone from the room, but the lemon oil stayed honest. The clock ticked. I let it. I woke at 4:52, the house dark and certain around me. Coffee, a shower, a clean shirt. I wrote 2 notes, one for James, one for Sarah, and sealed them without rereading. They said the same thing in different words. I'm returning what belongs to you. I'm keeping what belongs to me. The difference between the two is not up for debate. I didn't sign them with love. I didn't sign them with anything. Names can be demands. Today, I preferred statements. At 6:41, I turned on the porch light and watched frost steam from the grass like a promise being kept. At 6:57, the truck turned onto my street. A white cab, a rectangle of a trailer that made a rectangle of a morning. Rodriguez hopped out at exactly 7, in a jacket that had moved other people's furniture through other people's winters. "Mr. Ryan," he said, and shook my hand with a grip that suggested he appreciated the difference between a job and a favor. Behind him, 2 men in wool caps waited with dollies, like horses waiting for reins. "You have the addresses?" I asked. He patted his chest pocket. "Briar Ridge first, then Pine Avenue. And the instructions." He smiled without teeth. "Deliver to the door, ask for a signature. If they won't sign, take a picture, send time-stamped. Your name on the note." "Thank you," I said. He looked past me, into the house. Not nosy, just curious, the way a craftsman is curious about the room he'll be judged by. "You want us to take anything else?" he asked casually, as if offering a last cigarette. "Not today," I said. They worked efficiently, the way people do when they're moving weights, not meanings. Boxes out of rooms that had waited too long to be honest about what they were. The piano bench. Sarah's name scrawled on the bottom from the day we let her make everything hers to encourage her to keep trying. James's leather jacket from 1999, wrapped in tissue that should have been humility, and wasn't. The trophies. The tie. The shoebox was more newspaper than clay. I watched without hovering. A man who watches too closely makes other men rush. A man who pretends not to care invites something to be dropped. I stood where I could see everything without appearing to see everything, which is a skill fathers learn when they're tired of being told their eyes are controlling. At 7:31, Rodriguez asked for the first signature from me, a receipt confirming the boxes the way a courtroom confirms a sentence. I signed and printed my name and added the addresses next to them in a neat hand. The paper made a satisfying drag under my pen. Some mornings give you that much. When the truck doors were closed, Rodriguez touched the brim of his cap in a gesture that belonged to another decade and made this one feel less cheap. "We'll be careful," he said. "We'll be respectful." "Respect is a good word," I said. It costs less than people think and buys more. He nodded. He looked like he wanted to say something else and decided against it. That's another kind of respect. They pulled out at 7:39. The streets swallowed their sound before the frost had finished its steam. I poured a second coffee and let the kitchen absorb the new shape of the day. The house didn't feel smaller without the boxes. It felt truer. I put the notes to James and Sarah into separate envelopes and addressed them in my careful print. I tucked Sarah's into the top box labeled piano books, so she'd see it before she saw the title of the song she never learned to finish. I tucked James's into the jacket collar because finding a letter in a place you put your mouth makes it harder to lie to yourself about what you just read. At 8:12, my phone buzzed. A photo from Rodriguez. James's porch. The stack of boxes on the mat. The note in my handwriting visible like a signature you can't deny. The timestamps lined up like teeth. He wrote nothing else. He didn't have to. 4 minutes later, another photo. Sarah stooped, the piano bench with the box on top, her storm door's reflection catching a woman's silhouette shaped like a decision she wasn't ready to make. The caption had a single check mark. I set the phone face down and let the thought land. This is what it looks like when you give people exactly what they asked for, and they discover that wanting is not the same as deserving. I cleaned the counter where the boxes had rested. Streaks where cardboard had learned the shape of our house, and put the Gatlinburg key back into the safe, turned the dial, and listened for the click that told me the tumblers respected the numbers I'd given them. At 8:33, the doorbell rang. I knew the height of the knock before I looked through the peephole. James's knuckles make a sound like someone testing a wall. I left the chain on, opened the door the width of a father's patience, and met eyes I'd watched blink open the day he was born. "What is this?" he demanded, and held up his phone with the picture of his steps, as if it were a verdict and not a photograph. "That," I said, "is your life being returned to you." He barked a laugh. "So you think you're clever?" "Not particularly," I said, "but I'm awake." He put his hand on the door as if pressure could change hinges. "Open this," he said. "I did," I said, and didn't. "You had my childhood things delivered to my house. You think this is, what, petty, Dad?" "I think it's accurate," I said. "Things that belong to you should be at your house." He cursed softly, the way men do when they're not ready to be the man they think they are. "This is insane!" Insane would be signing a paper I didn't read because my son told me reading was a waste of time, I said evenly. Insane would be moving into a basement because the adults at a dinner I wasn't invited to decided I was a risk factor that could be mitigated with a kitchenette. His jaw clicked. I could see the argument he'd rehearsed this morning go off its rails. He regrouped, pulled out a paper, the letter of intent, folded and unfolded enough to look tired. He pushed it through the gap so that it bent against the chain. "This is a good offer. You're being stubborn to prove a point." "There are points worth proving," I said. "What? That you can't be told what's best for you? Congratulations. Message received." His mouth made a line I recognized from every game he'd lost when he was 7. "Do you realize how selfish this is?" "Selfish?" I repeated. Not because I needed clarity, but because sometimes the echo of a word shames it into being honest. "We're trying to help you," he said, louder now, volume always the last tool of a man who was right out of others. "You had a buyer lined up before I'd finished my coffee," I said. "Yes, I noticed." He took a breath that tried to be a reset. "Where are you going?" "Inside," I said. "You can call me at 2. I'll be available until 3. "Dad!" 2 to 3, I repeated, and closed the door in a way that didn't slam. The chain fell back against the jamb with a small sound that felt like a punctuation mark. He stood on the porch for the length of a pride, then left. His tires made a statement against the pavement that the street ignored. When his car turned the corner, the house relaxed in the way houses do when the person breathing on them has stopped trying to make them smaller. At 9:05, Sarah called. I answered. "Dad," she said, and the word cracked. "What are you doing?" "Returning what belongs to you," I said. "They're just boxes," she said, but she had never been able to say just without swallowing glass. "They're reminders," I said, "and you don't have to keep them. You can throw them away. That's part of the lesson, too." "Please don't be cruel," she said. "I'm not," I said, and knew it was true. "I'm being economical." She was quiet long enough to make me think she'd hung up. Then Lily saw them. She asked me why her piano books were on the porch. What should I tell her? "That they're hers," I said. "And that learning to finish something is sometimes slower than wanting to." "That's not fair," she said. And there it was again, the word people use when an outcome refuses to match their intention. Fairness is a longer conversation than we have today. I didn't hang up on her. I let the call end the way a swing ends when you stop pushing it. Emotion deciding, not anger. When the line went quiet, the kitchen sounded bigger. The clock in the hall sounded closer. Before noon, I drove to the bank. I moved a modest sum from the joint account Martha and I used for groceries into the travel account with the card she called a dare. I left the balances otherwise undisturbed. There's a wisdom in not making the numbers dance just because you've learned a new step. I stood in line behind a man depositing cash with his hat in his hands, in front of a woman arguing with a teller about a fee she probably agreed to and never read. The bank smelled like old carpet and counterfeit pins. I signed where the clerk told me to sign and left with my copy, which mattered to no one but me, and therefore mattered the most. On the way home, I stopped at the post office to check the box. Inside, a smaller envelope from Gatlinburg with my name in the kind of ink that doesn't smear. I didn't open it in the parking lot. Not everything needs to be eaten hot. I slid it into the glove compartment with the manual for a car I no longer trust to tell me the truth about its oil light. At home, I put the envelope next to its older brother on the table and stood with my hands on either side of the wood, palms flat, fingers spread, like a man measuring something he intends to build. The plan had shifted from paper to physical. The boxes had moved. People had been forced to carry parts of themselves they had assumed I would keep holding. The next pieces would be quieter. Airline confirmations, tucked where they couldn't be found by anyone looking for me on a shared family plan. Utilities scheduled for a future that did not require me to announce a forwarding address. Keys duplicated, not because I'm worried about being locked out, but because being locked in is a different kind of trap I have no intention of entertaining. At 1:59, the phone rang. James, on time, because even pride respects an appointment if it thinks it might get something out of it. 2 to 3, I said. He exhaled through his teeth. "You've made your point." "Not yet," I said, "but I'm on schedule." "What do you want?" he asked. And finally, it was a question. "I want to live in my house until I choose not to," I said. "I want you to stop treating my no as a phase. I want your realtor to stop treating my address like a line item. I want you to learn the difference between help and control." He let the silence do a little work then. "And if I can't?" "You will," I said, "because the alternative is smaller than even you want it to be." What does that mean? Suspicion is just fear in business casual. It means courts. It means transcripts. It means recordings that sound worse in a courtroom than they did on my kitchen speaker. It means a judge asking you why you threatened conservatorship
for a man who can quote his mortgage payoff date and the interest rate of his annuity from memory. "You recorded me," he snapped. "I preserved a conversation," I said, "because one day you always wish you had." I didn't raise my voice. He didn't lower his, but something in his tone lost a layer of certainty. "So what now?" "Now," I said, "we don't talk about the house again. When you have something to discuss that isn't about its square footage, you call me on a Sunday after church and ask me if I'd like to meet you for pie, not because you think I need sugar, but because you want to hear about the garden." He scoffed, but not with his whole mouth. "Pie." "Yes," I said, "the kind that takes patience and pays you back slice by slice." "We're done here," he said. "For now," I said, and let the call end like a porch swing again. In the quiet that followed, I packed the one suitcase I trusted. Socks that know the shape of my feet. 2 shirts that don't make me look like a man trying to be less old than he is. The shaving kit Martha gave me on our 20th anniversary because she liked the smell of sandalwood. The photo of her on the beach, somehow still warmer than the sun will ever be on my face again. The passport. The card she called a dare. I left the suitcase open on the bed in the guest room and went downstairs to the garden. The rosemary has been pruned. The apple tree will always need something. I cut 3 apples anyway, set them in a bowl on the counter, and wrote a note to myself on the legal pad. Lock back door. Water basil. Leave keys with Joyce in an envelope marked mail. Practicalities are how men like me tell ourselves we're not dreaming when we're finally doing the thing we've been threatening to do. The doorbell rang again at 4:11. I knew the weight of these footsteps. Lighter, quicker. The sound of someone still hoping the conversation could be turned into something without sharp edges. Sarah alone. I opened the door all the way because there are moments when you give someone the dignity of access, even if you don't give them the thing they came for. She stood on the porch with the box of piano books in her arms and the note on top, like a sunburn she hadn't expected. "I can't take this," she said, and lifted the box like proof. "You already did," I said. Tears threatened the edges of her eyes, the way weather threatens a picnic. "Don't do that," she said. "Don't do what?" "Don't turn everything into a line that sounds good," she said. "Just—" Her voice broke. "Just tell me what you want me to learn." She had been my daughter for 39 years, and this was the first time she asked me that question without expecting the answer to be a ladder she could climb to wherever she had already decided she was going. I exhaled through my nose and felt something in my chest make room for something that wasn't anger. "Keep what's yours. Stop asking other people to store it for you. Don't confuse access with love."
"And if you want to be the person who brings things to the table," I nodded at the box, "practice by carrying your own to the car." She blinked, surprised I knew where that line came from. Then she held the box tighter and, to her credit, didn't ask for help down the steps. When she reached the bottom, she turned. Are we going to see you?" "Yes," I said. "When I decide, I'll tell you. And when I say Sunday and pie, I'll mean it." She half laughed, half cried. "Pie," she said, as if the word could hold everything we had failed to make of other words. "Drive safe," I said, and closed the door softly, the way you do when you've learned that loud doesn't add anything except echoes. In the evening, as the house folded itself into the moth-colored light that makes a man honest, I walked the rooms one more time. I touched the table where the tick marks measured height. I straightened the photograph of Martha on the mantel, not because it was crooked, but because it made me feel like I could be useful to her in one last way. I locked the front door, left the porch light on, and set the Gatlinburg envelope back on the desk where it could shape the air while I slept. Tomorrow would be the first day my children woke up with parts of themselves on their floors instead of mine. Tomorrow would be the day I bought apples in a place where the apples had not learned my grief. Tomorrow would be another day in a life I chose. For now, it was enough to stand in my kitchen with clean counters and a bowl of fruit and a plan that didn't need anyone else's permission to be real. When Saturday rolled around again, the house had learned my new quiet. It wasn't the hush of mourning anymore. It was the hush of a plan that had moved from paper to muscle. The boxes were gone. The table was clear. The Gatlinburg key sat in the safe like a low-burning fire. Steady heat, no smoke. At 8:03 a.m., a text from James blinked onto the screen. "We're coming by at 10. Don't make this difficult." I typed nothing. I brewed coffee and watered the basil Martha had coaxed through 3 winters like stubborn hope. I put apples in a bowl on the counter because Eleanor's message had made that small ritual feel like practice. Then I sat at the kitchen table and wrote 3 lines on the legal pad. Breathe first. Ask questions they don't want to answer. Make them hear each other. The trick with family isn't volume, it's acoustics. At 9:59, I heard the familiar impatience of tires on gravel. James's SUV carries its weather with it. I opened the door before they could knock. He came in first, shoulders pitched forward, jaw set tight. Sarah followed, cheeks pink from the cold, lips pressed like she was holding something in that might break her teeth if it got out. No Lily. The absence felt like a draft. "Morning," I said. "We need to settle this." James didn't sit. He paced the length of the rug like a man measuring a field for a fence that would be taller than the deed allowed. "Coffee?" I asked, because offering hospitality to people who have rehearsed hostility has a way of knocking the script out of their hands. "No," he snapped. "Yes, please," Sarah said, and the words surprised her mouth. I poured her a cup. She stared at the steam as if it might tell her what to say next. I took my seat and let the chair make its honest creak. "You said settle," I said to James. "That presumes a dispute. Let's be clear about what yours is." "The house," he said, as if the 2 words could congeal into law. "You can't keep it. It isn't. "There is no mortgage," I said again, because repetition is sometimes obedience and sometimes a mirror. "Taxes, maintenance, safety," he fired back rapidly. "It's not sustainable." He leaned on the phrase like a handrail that had held his weight before. Sarah's voice arrived softer. "Dad, we're worried about you falling, about you being alone. You're worried about the house being mine. Those aren't the same worry." James stopped pacing. "We found another buyer, stronger number. We have a letter of intent." "You had," I said, and slid Michael's certified mail receipt across the table like a chess piece. "Your buyer has been notified that any further contact goes through counsel. There will be no sale." "This is ridiculous." "You're forcing us to say what you want out loud, which is why you're angry." He stared at me, and for a flicker I saw the 7-year-old who hated that the bat was heavy, but hated more when I helped hold it. He pivoted to new ground. "If you won't be practical, we'll petition for conservatorship." Sarah flinched. She hadn't known he'd bring that word into this room again. She set her coffee down too carefully. "Then, petition," I said, and my voice surprised all 3 of us with its evenness. "You'll discover that judges prefer facts to feelings. Bring evidence. We'll bring recordings." James's mouth opened and closed. He didn't like the sound of himself when he wasn't the one playing the callback. Sarah tried to catch the rope before he fell further. "We don't want to do any of this," she said. "We want you safe. We want you close." "In the basement," I said. "In our home," she said, a plea underneath the performance. "In your basement," I repeated. "Let's be precise." Silence stretched just long enough to make the next sound count. I reached for my phone, set it in the center of the table, and tapped the speaker icon. "We should include Lily,"
I said. She belongs in any conversation about her tuition and my house. Sarah's hand shot out. Don't drag her into this. She's already in it, I said. She just doesn't know which part of the story is true. James huffed. She's in class. It's Saturday, I said, and dialed. The ring sounded larger in the room because nobody breathed. Hi, Grandpa. Lily answered on the second ring, the bright morning in her voice. I was just about to call you. Mom said, Hey, Lil, I said gently and looked at Sarah, who looked down. I've got your mom and your Uncle James here on speaker. We're at my kitchen table. I wanted us to talk together. Oh, she said, the vowel changing shape as it moved through her. Okay. How's school? Fine, I asked, because I have learned that starting with the non-essential is often the only way to keep a bridge from burning before anyone crosses it. And the tuition transfer? Did it post? What? She said. The $500 I've been sending you since freshman year? I said. Every month. You get them, right? Silence lay between us with weight. What money? She said. So small. I wanted to stand up and find a way to rewire time. I didn't look at Sarah yet. I kept my eyes on the bowl of apples, because they were honest. Your account that ends in 3842, I said. Direct deposit on the second business day of each month. Lily's breath hitched in my kitchen like she was the one sitting at this table. Mom told me that was... She stopped. The sentence had nowhere to go. I thought that was them helping. I wanted you to have what you needed without having to ask. Books, dues, whatever made school feel less like a fight. James's palm slapped the table. Dad, this is exactly why... We needed to have this conversation together, I said, not looking at him. On the other end, Lily made a sound that was ugly and human and made the whole room lean. Mom? For once, I let the silence be a mercy, not a tool. My transfers add up to $12,000, I said quietly into the phone. 24 months, $500 at a time. It's not everything. It's not nothing. Lily started to cry, not the performative kind that asks for a camera, but the kind that leaks out of your actual body when a story breaks open and light rushes into a room that's been closed too long. I'm so sorry, she said, breathless, to a person she had thought she knew. Grandpa, why didn't you tell me? Your mother asked me not to, I said. She said it would complicate... Complicate who? Lily asked. Complicate what? No one answered her, because no one could answer her without changing their shape themselves. I looked at Sarah, not to punish, but because the person who needs to speak should be the one who made the speech necessary. She met my eyes like a student who has finally realized the exam is not multiple choice. I didn't want you to... She swallowed. To feel like you owed him. I wanted you to think You wanted credit, Lily said through tears, merciless in the way truth is when it's still raw. You wanted me to keep calling you a hero. Sarah's face folded. Lily, baby, no. I wanted control, I said softly, because it is sometimes a kindness to name the thing that is eating everyone's time. James stood, couldn't find a place to put his height, and sat again. This is not how we do this, he said to no one who could help him. You don't solve this on a phone call. You started it on a phone call, I said, not unkind. Lily sniffed hard. Grandpa, are you okay?
I looked out at the apple tree and watched a small winter bird land on a branch like punctuation. I'm fine, Em. You don't sound fine, she said. I sound decided, I said. There's a difference. She inhaled like she was going to decide in front of all of us. I'm coming over. No, Sarah said, too fast. Yes, I said, calm, but not today. Today you go for a walk, you buy yourself something hot that does not come with a grade, then you call me tomorrow when the world is less loud inside your head.
She surprised me by listening. "Okay," she whispered. "I love you." "I love you too," I said, then added because it mattered. "For your company, not your report card." The line clicked off. The room felt larger because the truth had taken up the space it was owed. Sarah pressed her palms to her eyes, the way people do when they think darkness will rearrange the furniture. "I didn't mean to—" She stopped because the rest of that sentence knows it is a lie. "I thought if she knew it would change how she looked at you, or how she looked at me. I wanted to protect your story," I said gently. "You wanted to protect the version where you fix everything." James found his footing in anger again. It's the floor he trusts most. "So this is the plan? Humiliate us? Make us the villains?